Oh, oh God. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Gamester here. This is the normal raid guide for General Nazgrim, and he's the 8th boss of Siege of Orgrimmar. And feel free to click on the annotations if you'd like to check out any of the other videos for this fight. For your raid composition, you'll want 2 tanks and 2 or 3 healers. This is actually the lowest healing per second required fight of any of the encounters, at least up through the first 9 bosses that we did our initial raid night. So I would strongly recommend 2 healers. There's very little to do on this fight in terms of healing if you handle the mechanics properly. And even if you handle them somewhat improperly, there's still very little damage going on. So the core mechanic for this fight is Rage for General Nazgrim. And I just have to say briefly that Blizzard did a great job on this subtle mechanic for this fight. It's really just a combination of Rage plus a cooldown that makes it very interesting. And it's kind of a lot of fun. So the basic idea is that Nazgrim will gain Rage throughout the fight, and he will then use a special attack that utilizes Rage, always casting the highest Rage cost ability that he has enough Rage for at the time. The trick is that every time he uses this special ability, he has a cooling off period, which lasts for 15 seconds. So while that is cooling off, he will not use another special ability until the cooling off period ends, at which point he will then check how much Rage he has and use the highest Rage cost ability he can at the time. So the goal, generally speaking, is to keep his Rage as low as possible between those cooling off periods so that he uses his weaker abilities and you don't have to deal with the more difficult mechanics. But again, it's a very subtle and simple system that's quite interesting in reality. So Nazgrim has 4 different Rage abilities. The cheapest one that I'll use most frequently costs 30 Rage, and it's Heroic Shockwave. And he basically leaps toward a nearby player, kind of smashes the ground, and sends out a couple Shockwave lines that players should avoid. Pretty basic stuff. If you're hit by a Shockwave line, there you can see the orange lines, he will gain 3 Rage for every player that's struck. So it's important to avoid that attack. The second Rage ability is the Korkron Banner. This costs 50 Rage, and it basically generates a buff that's applied to all the minions throughout the fight that cause their attacks to generate 3 Rage for Nazgrim as well. Third is War Song, which costs 70 Rage. So again, he'll use that at 70 Rage, or between 70 and 99 Rage, essentially. And this causes him to shout, dealing damage equal to 50% of every player's health. And this one is kind of just a little cooldown ability that you need to watch for. So if it pops up, just use a personal or raid-wide cooldown to help mitigate it. And then finally is Ravager, which is 100 Rage. This is by far the most dangerous and something you want to avoid if at all possible. Unfortunately, you can see a Ravager axe in the back of the room there. He throws the axe around the room and it just spins, kind of traveling about for the remainder of the fight. And any player that gets touched by this will cause Nazgrim to gain 5 Rage. So this is the main thing that you want to avoid. All the other abilities are one-time, effects essentially that you can avoid and not take any permanent damage. But every time he gains 100 Rage and uses the Ravager, it adds a new axe to the room permanently. And this snowballs very quickly if you're not careful. The more axes that are out, the more chances that someone will get hit by it, and therefore the more Rage Nazgrim will gain, which then pushes him further to throwing out more axes, and so on and so forth. So the overall goal, based on the Rage mechanics, is to avoid pushing him to 100 within 15 seconds and causing an axe to spawn. So as a warrior, Nazgrim has 3 different stances that he'll use throughout the fight. He, of course, has Battle Stance, Berserker Stance, and Defensive Stance. And he will use each of these for 1 minute in duration before he swaps to the next stance in his order. So every time he uses this stance, it always lasts a minute, and he will always go to the next stance in order, starting with Battle Stance first, and then Berserker Stance second, defensive stance third, and then he'll repeat the process. So above here, you can see the basic chart for the stance, the effect that it gives General Nazgrim, and whether it's a good idea to DPS Nazgrim during that stance period. So for battle stance, he gains 1 rage per second, and DPS are free to DPS him. This 1 rage per second is in addition to any he will gain from special moves, of course. For Berserker stance that he uses second, he takes and deals 25% more damage, but he gains 100% extra rage from special attack gains. However, he does not have innate rage gain like he did in battle stance. So during Berserker stance, if your raid properly avoids all his special attack rage gains, he won't really gain any extra, but he does get 100% more from any rage from his special moves. During this period for Berserker, DPS is great because obviously he takes 25% more damage. So Berserker periods are when you'll want to use DPS cooldowns, Bloodlust, stuff like that. And then finally, defensive stance that he goes into third, you cannot DPS him. The effect of this is his damage is reduced by 10%, damage taken rather. But more importantly, every time he's struck, he gains 3 rage. The only exception to this rule is that the tank that currently has the debuff for tanking him will not cause him to gain extra rage. So the tank with Sundering Blow can freely attack him while he's in defensive stance. But other than that, any other attacks will cause him to gain 3 extra rage. So during defensive stance, your DPS really should not engage him at all. Now you can do a little bit of damage, perhaps, as long as you keep his rage low so it doesn't reach that 100 threshold. But again, I wouldn't risk it unless you're getting close to the Berserk timer or something like that. So when you enter the room and clear all the trash, you'll notice that Nazgrim is guarding a door. So the positioning for this fight should be based on where the adds will appear. If you tank Nazgrim near the door where he starts, this will prevent the adds from getting too close to him, which is useful so that he doesn't gain extra healing or anything like that. So tank the boss near the door here, and then behind the raid, to my right now, or actually behind me now, is where the waves of adds will come in. They basically rush up over the cliff and engage the raid. So there are 4 different types of adds, some of them far more dangerous than others, so I'll just briefly list those. The first and most dangerous, or most important to worry about rather, is the War Shaman. And these, of course, heal. So you want to kill them quickly, stun them, interrupt them, all that good stuff. If they cast Earth Shield on Nazgrim especially, make sure you purge it off, dispel it off him. And if they cast Healing Tide Totem, it's only got an 8-yard radius, so you can just simply move mobs out of it if possible. Otherwise, just kill the totem quickly. The second most dangerous is the Arcweaver. This is a mage, and the main ability that's worrisome is Arcane Shock. This is just a chain cast ability that will increase in damage every time it's cast, and so they gain this stacking buff. So eventually the damage will be quite high if you don't kill them quickly or don't interrupt most of their casts. So focus on the Arcweaver second. Third is the Assassin, and these are, of course, rogues. They will stealth. The big thing is that they fixate on targets, and they will try to backstab that player. Now, to handle backstab from an assassin, you simply have to face the assassin at all times if it's fixated on you. It cannot backstab you unless it gets behind you. So while it's visible, not stealthed, make sure you're looking at it. And then finally is the Iron Blade, which are just warriors of sorts. I don't know why they're trying to be warriors with Nazgrim up in it, but yeah, that's their thing. They're very weak. They basically just do a whirlwind where they spin around a lot, and these can be tanked by your off tank that's not on Nazgrim at the time. So the best way we found to deal with them was just to have the off tank pick them up, hold them kind of away from the rest of the raid. There's one in the back there you can see. And as they spin around, DPS, ranged DPS can kill them off. You can also stun them to interrupt their spin and all that good stuff. But these should be the last priority pretty much. So War Shamans and Arcweavers first, then Assassins, and then finally Iron Blades. So the final mechanic to discuss in detail is Sundering Blow, which is the primary debuff for the tanks, and this is the ability that requires tank swaps. So the reason this is more important to discuss than other basic tank swap mechanics is that on this fight, this ability causes a lot of rage gain for Nazgrim, and if your tanks do not properly handle this, this will be a sole reason that the boss will gain 100 rage, spawn a bunch of axes, and things can quickly get out of control. So, Sundering Blow is used about every 10 seconds on the current tank, does heavy physical damage, reduces their armor 10%, it stacks, it lasts 30 seconds, all that stuff. Most importantly, it generates 5 rage for Nazgrim, plus 5 additional rage for every stack of Sundering Blow on the target at the time. So because it's cast about every 10 seconds, a little under, and the debuff lasts 30 seconds, the tank swaps can only occur every third stack. So basically, the current tank has to get a 3 stack, and then the next tank should taunt within that 10-second period before the 4th stack is applied. There you see on the screen, our current tank got 4, and now 5, which is terrible. So, we're not handling that properly, and eventually we get an axe because of it. So the basic plan here, again, is to only go to 3 Sundering Blows for your tanks. On the 3rd hit, for any given tank, that will cause Nazgrim to gain 5 plus 10 extra for a total of 15 rage. Now, if Nazgrim is in Berserker stance at the time, he gains 100% extra rage for being in the stance from special attacks. So he'll actually gain 30 rage. That's the reason that swapping this properly is so important, because if he goes up to a 4th stack, for example, instead of gaining 15 times 2 of 30, he'll gain 20 times 2, so he'll gain 40 rage from that 4th hit. And you only have that 10-second window in which to swap tanks properly, so it's important that you are paying attention and you do that quickly, or he will get a lot of rage very fast, especially in Berserker. So the final thing to note is that at 10% health, Nazgrim will spawn an extra set of adds. So up to this point, you should be killing the adds as soon as they appear so that they don't overwhelm you, they don't cause any extra rage gain, all that. But at this point, you should actually have started the burn and basically CC or ignore these adds to push Nazgrim over and finish him off. So I improperly instructed our raid as a raid leader to try to kill these adds when they appeared, and that was by far the wrong call. So you can see things get a little chaotic, and it takes us a long time to actually finish them off here. But the right thing to do would have been at 15% or so, finish off any adds that we had active and call for Bloodlust and push him over. Now, even if the boss is in defensive stance at this time, you still want to do it based on his health rather than trying to do it based on his stance or anything like that. Because if he gets 100 rage and spawns an axe at this point, it doesn't matter. I mean, you're just trying to push him over before things overwhelm you, essentially. So, a little above 10%, finish off any adds that may be active, blow all your cooldowns, and push the boss over and kill him. So, that is General Nazgrim's normal raid guide. It's quite a fun fight, very cool mechanics. I like it a lot. Be interesting to see what heroics like. As always, good luck, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed, please subscribe.